Excellent. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our Opportunity for All Summit 2.0, the role of gender equity in the economic recovery. My name is Lady Idos. I'm the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and the Berkeley Lab Foundation is also a proud sponsor of today's event. I'm excited to moderate our second panel, which is called Ensuring an Equitable Recovery, What Can Business and Local Governments Do? I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists, then we'll jump into our discussion. But in the meantime, we encourage our attendees to submit any questions they might have into our Q&A box located at the bottom toolbar of your Zoom window. And we'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible toward the end of the panel. So please feel free to submit. And with that, I'm proud to introduce our panelists today. So welcome, esteemed panelists. Thank you for joining. First, I'd like to introduce Christine Keener. Christine Keener serves as a Director of Government and Community Affairs in Northern California at Verizon. She's responsible for developing and implementing the company's local government and community affairs strategy, which includes public policy, community engagement, and philanthropic work. In addition, she's helping to bring a robust technology network that will redefine how people live, work, play, and thrive. Through coalition building, she strives to create solutions that solve social problems and enhance community resiliency. Prior to joining Verizon, Keener was the Manager of Policy and Community Affairs for San Francisco's Department of Recreation and Parks, where she managed government relations and community affairs. So welcome, Christine. Next, I'd like to welcome Anne O'Leary. Anne is a partner in the Jenner and Block Litigation Department, co-chair of Government Controversies and Public Policy Litigation Practice, and a member of Investigations, Compliance, and Defense Practice. As a lawyer and crisis leader, she's worked on significant workplace, climate, energy, economic, and public health issues. She brings decades of experience in government, politics, social policy, and nonprofit leadership. Prior to joining the firm in 2021, Ms. O'Leary served as Chief of Staff to the Governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Ms. O'Leary also co-chaired the Governor's Task Force on Business and Jobs Recovery and chaired the Governor's Strike Team on Energy and Wildfires. So with that, welcome, Anne. And last but certainly not least, Michelle Rife is the VP of Talent Acquisition at Aurora, a self-driving company founded in 2017 with the mission to deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. She's led global analytics recruiting at Facebook and brings her expertise in scaling recruitment functions and driving recruiting strategy. Michelle has more than 25 years of experience building and leading recruiting teams at a variety of tech companies like Facebook, GE Digital, and PlayStation. She's extensive experience in building teams and creatively approaching talent acquisition to meet the business needs of big and small companies while raising the bar for recruiting practices. And with that, welcome, Michelle. So I'm really happy to meet you all today. And we'll go ahead and start with Christine for the first question here. So Christine, in the earlier panel, we took a look at the overall trends of women leaving the workforce. And so my question for you, has Verizon seen this trend across your workforce as well?
Thank you so much. Well, here at Verizon, we really pride ourselves on inclusion and creating a culture of collaboration and diversity and creating a space where people will know that they belong. And so we create comprehensive benefits and supportive programs that really worked to make sure that we are not seeing those trends. We want to ensure that there is no kind of guilt-induced kind of work-life balance, and that we have to call it life integration, to where what we've seen is that we've merged our lives and our works, and that we have to be very cognizant of that going forward. No longer can this be a either or society. And so that means things like, part-time benefits, comprehensive leave, skill and workforce development. Some of the programs that we're really focused on have been reskilling and upskilling. I can't help but think about toll workers and how those jobs are probably not coming back in the same sense that they once were, or they're completely gone in some sectors of our society. So how are we training and kind of thinking about reskilling and upskilling folks for jobs that allow them to compete in the global market? we're also, as a tech company, using emerging technologies such as AR and VR to have a more immersive experience for our employees, to help them train, whether it's the new kind of form of retail store, or some of our folks who are in crisis response team and how they respond to fires at some of the fire base camps or command centers, and also tuition assistance. One of the barriers that we know are that some of the folks who are on leave or want to be able to come back, want to be able to have jobs that require more kind of technical skill path forward. So we provide tuition assistance to allow folks to be able to do that and help out. In 2019, we did $50 million into that program, and over 13,000 women V-teamers were able to take advantage of that program. I think we all can say the world has changed a lot over the past year. And so what we did at Verizon, we did kind of a Verizon look forward study to say, how have our digital habits changed over the past year? And essentially we've seen is that we've jumped digitally 5 to 7 years into the future, right? The way we learn is different. The way we stream television is different. The way we shop, right? We expect more user-friendly experiences. Our civic engagement is different. We can now call in to a hearing and not have to go to City Hall and wait 3 hours for an item for a 2-minute public comment, right? So I think the way that we live, work, and play is extremely different. And I think a lot of people's kind of anxiety, and what we're seeing is that people are like, I can't go back to the norm because the norm didn't work for me. So how are we stepping back to see what can we do to be more equitable and make sure that we are acknowledging the people that have been left behind or who are struggling in this new economy and world to compete and thrive? And so while things are, we feel good about what's happening here with Verizon, we also have a commitment to our society and a commitment to meeting the moment. So some of those ways that we do that are with our Women's Collab, to where we bring in kind of small business owners, people who are at risk, lower income, people experiencing homelessness, to be able to meet with our employees and others, to be able to talk about like industry, secrets, networking, mentorship, pathways to success within the workforce. Another thing that we're doing later this year is a kind of a digital leadership summit where we invite women from all over different sectors to be able to just have discussions and to learn from one another. I think, as Alexis talked about, allyship is extremely important, but being very intentional about our allyship is also very important. We have to commit to doing the work every single day. It has to show up in every decision that we make and every meeting that we make. And so we're doing the work. We will continue to do the work, and we still have a lot more to go.
Thank you, Christine. I also liked that comment about active allyship. I think that was spot on. So thank you so much. The next question I have is actually for Michelle. So Michelle, I understand that Aurora has launched an on-ramp program aimed at bringing women back into the workplace. And can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Sure. First of all, glad to be here. We started a program, a pilot called Jumpstart Returnship, which is essentially an additional pathway for us to bring diverse talent into Aurora. Part of our strategy and part of our culture is to create and continue to create this thriving, inclusive culture where we have folks from different backgrounds, experiences, not just gender or by ethnicity, but different experiences, different perspectives. And we know that women bring those different viewpoints to the workforce. One of the things that's really important about this program is the majority of women who leave the workforce to tend, as we've talked about, family, and especially last year, their biggest barrier to entry to coming back into the workforce, especially within engineering roles, is the gap in their resume. And many companies look at that and say, well, you've been out of the workforce for a couple of years, so how current are your skills? How knowledgeable are you on the latest technologies? And one of the great things about the Jumpstart program is it's a 16-week program where we bring women back into the workforce, provide them that mentorship, provide them updated skills and experiences that hopefully they can use not only as a potential employee for us, but even if they don't stay with Aurora, they've gained additional skills and experiences that are much more current to make them more marketable as they go into the workforce. It's also important to note that Aurora as a company, we're in the automated driving space, and a lot of people don't understand or don't know a whole lot about it. But the self-driving technology that we're building is really revolutionizing how we move goods and people. And part of that is that we're creating the jobs for the future today. This is still a new area, and one in which we are building the technology, but also the jobs for the future. As a company, we also have always kind of continued bringing in individuals who don't necessarily have traditional backgrounds. We have a few folks on our team. We have one of our employees who came into our vehicle operations team, used to be a firefighter, and she brought her medical experience in caring for people into Aurora. We trained her on vehicle operations, and now she's moved to another role within the company. We've got a woman that oversees our product planning and partnership and operations efforts, and she worked for the Obama administration. So, I think as a company, doing the Jumpstart program is just an extension of who we are, in that we really value individuals with different perspectives and experiences. And this is a great way for us to not only give back, but it's also a great way for us to open those doors for women that traditionally wouldn't have those opportunities.
Thanks, Michelle. It sounds like a lot of companies have a lot to learn about Jumpstart and how they can do something similar. So thank you for sharing. Anne, we'll turn it over to you next. Given your previous experience in the public sector, did you have specific initiatives where you saw a positive impact in women joining and moving up in the workforce?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. And I just want to really thank Christine and Michelle in particular. I think that, as important as government action is, what I really want to say to everyone today is that government action takes some time. And what's going to matter right now is having leaders like Christine and Michelle in place doing this type of work, because it is critical that we tackle this problem now. For those of you who are able to be on to watch the first panel, it's quite jarring to see that we have a recession that has impacted not just women, but really mothers. In fact, I was reading a little bit up before the panel and digging into the San Francisco Federal Reserve research that was highlighted on the first panel. And the statistic that was most alarming to me was this notion that if you looked at women who are not mothers versus women who are mothers, and you actually said, if they were being able to come back at the same amount, what would it look like? You'd have 700,000 more women back at work. That is startling. And so what does it mean for what government can do and what the private sector can do? First of all, I think government's doing the right thing. You have people like Governor Newsom leading on the front lines, and you've got people like President Biden. Both of them are extraordinarily committed to working with the state legislature and with Congress to pass massive child care expansions, to pass expansions of paid family leave. And then you've got legislators in Sacramento, like the, just talented and formidable Lorena Gonzalez, who helped us pass paid sick days in California in the first instance, who was saying, let's expand it from 3 to 5 days. All of those things are going to make a huge difference. But I think the other thing is that we have to be really intentional in the private sector right now about what we're doing. And there's really, kind of 3 pieces of advice, much of which Christine and Michelle are already doing. But I want to just highlight them. So one is, first of all, let's be intentional about how we're bringing people back. So at my law firm, Jenner & Block, we have offices all over the United States. And I was really impressed by the firm leadership, where they said, listen, we're going to let people to start voluntarily coming back once they're vaccinated. So if they want to go into the office, they can, but we're not going to really fully open our offices until September 13th. And that was a very intentional date, because they wanted to make sure to say to people, listen, we're going to give you the summer to figure out the planning, because so many people at all levels of the law firm have caregiving needs. And because camps have been unpredictable, schools are just getting up, and they're not starting on the first day of school. They're giving people, a week or 2 to get into the routine and figure it out. So I think that's important. Like, how do we actually come back? And then, as Christine was saying, once people get back, there's not a lot of tolerance for, oh, I'm going to work exactly as I did before. So there's going to be a lot of learning that people like the Bay Area Council are going to be critical to, which is, how do we learn from each other? What's working for you? Is this flexibility working? Is this predictability working? Who's it working working for? So I think those conversations are going to be, really, really critical. And then, the other piece is that some of the entire economy is shifting. And so one of the reasons women are out of work isn't only because of the childcare issue, it's because women have been displaced. And so the hospitality industry, the leisure industry, these are the industries that are most impacted, and the jobs aren't coming back as quickly, in part because of the continued COVID concerns. And so these retraining programs that Michelle was talking about are going to be critical, which is there are going to be women who are never going to get back to the job that they had before because it's not going to exist. And so how do we capture that great talent and that human resource and actually help people with retraining? So that's really important. And then finally, I'll just say the other thing that I think is important, both for government and for the private sector to do, is to really think more broadly. And so the government can put a floor on paid sick days or unpaid leave, but the private sector can be really creative about it. And so, COVID, it may be ending right now. Maybe we're getting vaccinated, although a lot of kids aren't yet vaccinated. And so that's an issue. And the other thing that's really important just to say out loud is that this has been emotionally traumatic for kids and for parents. And it's not going to be just easy to kind of put your school clothes back on and your work clothes back on and get back to work. And so employers providing greater leave, greater flexibility, greater opportunity to say, listen, I actually need to take unpaid leave and I need to do it for a longer period of time. And employers saying it's not only okay to ask, you won't be retaliated against, but we're going to proactively encourage you to take care of your mental health, to take care of your family's mental health. And so I think that will be important as we go back as well. And I will say on that, just absolutely huge kudos to Governor Newsom, to Secretary Mark Galley for reserving $4 billion in the California budget for mental health and really for mental health screening of young people, because this is an issue that I think many parents are figuring out. How do we make sure that our young people get the help that they need? So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I think, as we continue down this path of bringing people back to work, I think we'll continue to hear about mental health, well-being, and wellness. So really appreciate the governor's leadership on this as well, and some of our state leaders. So the next question I'd like to ask for the group here, and Anne, you've touched on this a little bit already, but after the past year that we've all been through, as women who are leaders in the workforce, what do you hope employers are thinking about as they work against the impacts of the pandemic, mitigating some of the things that we've talked about, and trying to bring women back into the workforce? And if you could, you can also share how your experiences have helped inform this perspective. So what advice do you have for employers? And so I can start with Christine, then we'll go with Michelle, and then anything else that you'd like to add to, Anne. So go ahead, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think prior to the pandemic, I would leave parts of my life in the foreground. And I think over the past year or so, I've really thought about we shouldn't leave our lives at the door when we start our workday. I think we've all been through a lot this past year and a half. And so kind of normalizing saying today is a hard day. Today I'm actually not going to be on camera. Are things that I think we've gotten better about saying and calling a thing a thing. I think some of my best days these past years have been on meetings when you've heard the doorbell ring, or you see the child enter the frame, or the dog bark, and someone's flustered because they have a really important part, but the dog won't stop barking. It's in those moments where I think we've shown each other grace to say, I see you, I see your lives, and I understand, and I feel that. I think being able to normalize that and be able to change the narrative and build and promote policies that allow us to be able to continue that part of what we've been through the past year, to say, I understand that you have things and I see that. And so I take that with grace. I think promoting real world solutions with that in mind really gets back to the intentionality factor, right? We can't get back to a place where we don't recognize people as people, and that people come with things to their workday. And that once you start at 9 or 8, that automatically you're this different person, but that when you bring your whole self to your work, you're actually bringing your perspectives and your background, which is really a competitive advantage for employers and for government, for everyone, because saying we bring perspectives. And so when we need to shift quickly, like we've done the past year, we're able to do that because we have multiple perspectives in mind from multiple people to say, we see you, we value you, and we understand you.
Thank you, Christine. And so if you hear my dog crying because he wants to be let outside, I appreciate the grace that you're extending to me. Let me go ahead and turn it over to Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Christine is saying. I think the thing for me is it's shown, when we had to pivot 100% from being in an office to being in a virtual world, to scramble, and especially in recruiting, when you're used to bringing people into an office and meeting them live in a person, and then trying to figure out how do we interview, qualify, have a great experience, and do it all in this virtual environment. It was a learning curve, but I think fast forwarding to today is we do lead with more intentionality, more empathy and understanding. And I think as women leaders, I think that some of that is inherent in who we are. And I think being okay to show that, to be having that in the forefront, to say, I am going to lead with that empathy. And I want my team and the folks I interact with to know who I am as a person, all of me, and not having to put on, I think, the airs that we used to have to be, as Christine said, checking our real self at the door and then showing and being that corporate or self, and then kind of going back to our family. I think for us at Aurora, and one of the things that I've really loved about how we've responded to the return to office is having flexibility and recognizing that everybody's situation is a little bit different. Be you, if you're single, married, have kids, don't have kids, whatever your situation is, and how do we ensure that we create space for people to deal and understand what's going to work for them coming back into the office, making sure those that are already in the office, because we do have employees that have to be in the office because of the hardware that we build, making sure that they are safe, and just creating, again, that space and that transition, and recognize that we'll have more flexibility because we have shown that we can be productive without having to be in an office for 8 to 10 hours a day. And I think as we all look to what's going to be happening the rest of this year in 2022, I think it's really changed the landscape of expectations of how we work and the productivity.
Thanks, Michelle. It also calls to mind, changing expectations of what we think about for leaders, right? And the kind of skills we're looking for in a leader to be able to extend that empathy and understanding and emotional intelligence. And so how do we look for that when we're looking to promote or we're looking to hire? So thank you for sharing. Anne, please.
Yeah, no, I think I just agree with everything Christine and Michelle said. What I will say, I was really proud to be the chief of staff to the governor. I started obviously before the pandemic, right after he won in November of 18. And I was really proud that I was the first woman ever to have school-aged children and do that job. And I used to say that a lot. And I kind of became embarrassed to say that, honestly, when I was in COVID, because I wasn't parenting. I really wasn't able to be very present for my kids. My kids are now 14 and 11. Their dad, who's phenomenal, is actually a California Supreme Court justice. And he ended up doing his very full-time job in parenting our kids almost 100% of the time. And I might start crying. It was really hard and heartbreaking. And I think, part of it is just the vulnerability of feeling like, oh my God, I'm not able to be a good parent. And I'm trying to do so much for California. Sorry, I don't usually talk about this, but, and then coming home and seeing like my kids really needed me. And so I think part of it is like, it's okay to say this was really hard and I still did the best I could. And I still also need to come home and, be a great lawyer and also be more present for my kids. And I think just saying like, there's a time and season for everything, but also just recognizing that I was able to make those decisions for my family. I have, education, I have social network, I have, money, and not everybody has that power. And so one of the things that I've struggled with, just even coming off of the governor's office, is to say, when do I use my voice and how do I use it? And sometimes I'm kind of shy to be like, well, I shouldn't say anything, but I don't agree. But sometimes I'm like, I know that because I have a bully pulpit and power, and there's so many women who don't, that I also feel a sense of responsibility. And it's kind of this like allyship that the first panel talked about. Like, I know I can speak up for that woman who may be in my organization, who may be cleaning my desk at night, or who may be coming in, to get the photocopying done and, trying to figure out how to get that, project done and have their kid cared for. And so the responsibility to both be vulnerable and say, this is really hard at the highest level, but then to use that vulnerability to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to protect anybody who is struggling with this because this is really hard. So that's my advice at this stage.
Thank you so much, Anne. And also thank you for sharing your story in terms of being vulnerable. And I think that's the kind of leadership that we've been wanting to see nowadays, are talking about letting go of the errors and things like that of the past. We're all human beings, and women particularly have a greater role in terms of the emotional labor and some of the things that we have to do at home. So definitely, I think your story resonates with folks here. Just want to remind our attendees to please go ahead and enter any questions you have into chat. And I do have another question for this group that anyone here can chime in. We've talked a little bit too about just gender equity in general, and we've worked so hard, decades, to work towards equal representation, equal pay, and research shows that we're still ways off from reaching true parity. So your thoughts on this? What do we all have to do, in your opinion, to reach a more gender equitable world? And if you can think about our colleagues here who don't identify as women, what can they do also to help us champion these issues as allies? Anyone can chime in here. Thank you.
I'm happy to start, saying that this kind of is my wheelhouse. I think, just as a woman who's been in this industry for a long period of time, there has been pay disparity, and part of it goes back to a lot of women, and even in the case of non-binary, aren't as aggressive when it comes to negotiating. And so what happens is, after they get to a company, that's where some of the disparity is. If the company isn't cognizant and intentional of ensuring that the salary bands and areas are fair and equitable across the company. I can tell you, as for us, it is something we look at in every single offer to make sure that we're not paying one person more than the other because they were able to negotiate higher. I think part of this is also important for mentorship and education, and allowing women helping them with the skills to know how to ask for what they deserve and ask for what is entitled, or however you want to put it, but they've got to speak for themselves. And it is a change in behavior. But I think as more companies are making pledges and understanding that pay equity is critical, because it's not only the right thing to do, but it also enables us to have a better perspective of having that diverse thought and experience in the company. We can help as women leaders and just empower women and others to be able to have a voice, kind of what Anne said.
Yeah, I might just add one thing to that, which I think is particularly important right now. And it's the notion that we also have to be really intentional not to have a pandemic bias, which is to say, when we see something that looks a little bit off in a resume or a narrative about a person, we need to both be able to ask questions and then actually not punish people. And so I'll give a very specific example. One of the jobs that I did for the governor was to recommend to the governor certain appointments that he might make. There was a person who had a stellar career, and then in March 2020, something didn't look quite right from March until June of 2020. And instead of saying like, oh, this person has fallen off the bandwagon, what is wrong with this person? Immediately, my first question was, well, what was that? What was a woman? What was her childcare responsibilities? Had my team go back and say, just try to have an honest conversation. It may be that the person wasn't performing because they had an issue. Well, it turns out she did have an issue. She had two elderly parents who she had to move in with her, and she had two children who were in elementary school and weren't working and weren't going to school. And so I think part of it is like, we need to also be super intentional as leaders to make sure that we don't assume a fallen performance in 2020 has anything to do with other than the awful situation that happened to so many families. And so I think it's incumbent upon us not to also force people to tell the story, but to just say, listen, it looks like something went off. would it be okay for you to share? Because I want to be able to say, this is not really relevant. It's not in some sense relevant because it doesn't reflect your, 45 years of amazing work before then, or, whatever it might be. So I think that's really important, particularly right now.
Yeah, and I think just adding a little bit to what Anna Michelle said, I think, we run the risk of, unraveling decades worth of progress that we've made with women in the workplace. I think it's continue to say that like our careers are not expendable in a crisis, that we will revert back to these norms that make folks feel comfortable when things get hard or tough. I think today the kind of the three things we really talked about are kind of intentionality, flexibility, and equity. I think kind of the fourth one is really access. And really thinking about our own privilege and platforms in these roles to say, we have the ability to make decisions sometimes about who's at the table, who we invite to the table, how decisions are going, how do we speak for people who are not able to speak in certain rooms, and to say, how do we make sure that their voices are being heard? I think about times when I make the jump from government to private to reach out to people who look like me, to say, how did that jump go for you? And it was hard to find people who look like me from deep East Oakland and say, how did you do this? Right? How did you, for people from San Francisco, go from getting off at Civic Center BART station every day to now getting off at Embarcadero in the kind of the tech financial district? That's different. And so talking to people who have that experience to say, here's some secrets, some inside trades that will help you in your process are extremely helpful to making sure that we're not undoing the progress that we've made. I talked about, getting to know people in their homes over the pandemic. I've also enjoyed doing community engagement events through Verizon, to where we would speak to young adults and young women, and like they would say, hey, Christine, like you have the same Steph Curry bobblehead that I have. It's those little things that where we build familiarity that say, okay, I can see myself in those roles. And I know that I have a champion in Christine or in Anna Michelle, that if I have questions or concerns, that I can go to them and they can provide me access and information to help me thrive and succeed. I think that is key to making sure that we don't undo things that we've worked so hard to achieve, and to make sure that we are being of voices to those who don't have voices, and using our privilege and platforms with intention as we move forward.
Thank you all so very much. We'd like to get into a couple of Q&A questions here. I first want to relay and a couple of comments here, thanking you for sharing your personal struggle, that working moms experience. And there's some resonance here with the audience, and someone saying how much that they can relate to the challenges as a parent and professional. And thank you for your honesty in using this platform for empowerment. So thank you for that. Anne, there's a question here for you. What can the business community do to encourage greater adoption of the new paid family leave benefits? And there's also a note that you're awesome. So I'll take it away.
Well, first of all, the Bay Area Council is one of the strongest leaders of paid family leave, not in the state of California, but in the country. And so what I will say is having a business voice for paid family leave is both progressive and so critical, because of, obviously advocates for women and children and labor unions are going to be for paid family leave, but having businesses say, this is not only good for our families, it's good for the bottom line. And Bay Area Council has been out saying that, and actually making sure that they share the research on that for years and years. And so that makes a really big difference. And I think having individual businesses, stand up and say, not only are we going to do it, but we think there should be a floor. And it's actually good for competition. Obviously, if everybody has at least the same floor, that's really important for businesses. And so right now, a couple of things. California, many people know this, but California is the first state in the country to have paid family leave. And now the country finally is at a point with Joe Biden in the White House to say we should get national paid family leave. I think it's incumbent upon California business leaders to say it's worked for us, it hasn't hurt us, it's only helped us. And we want to see this happening nationally, will be really important. The other thing that happened during the pandemic, which was really important, in Bay Area Council, many businesses played a role in this, is that in California, we actually, not only did we have paid family leave, we actually did something that I'd been advocating with Bay Area Council and many others, was that we needed to make sure that people didn't get fired if they used paid family leave. And so we actually passed that job protection with the leadership of State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, who's now retired. But we did that last year. There were a lot of, it was very squeaky. We almost didn't get it through because a lot of legislators felt like, oh, why are you doing this in the middle of the pandemic? Well, I think this panel shows exactly why we were doing it in the middle of the pandemic, which is we needed to make sure that there were protections for workers who needed to care for their ailing relatives in the middle of the pandemic. And so making sure not only that we had paid family leave, but we have job protection, and having businesses say this is good for our workers and good for the bottom line is so important.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'd like to turn this next question over to Christine and Michelle, and Anne, if you have anything to add here. There's a question about mental health resources. And if Verizon or Aurora is talking about mental health, if there's anything that your companies have been able to do around that, and or any suggestions. So I'll turn it over to Christine and Michelle and have Anne weigh in as well.
Well, I can tell you at Aurora, and we recognize on our mental health month, for May, it is something that is just part of our culture, going back to the empathy, understanding. We understand just in how we've looked at our returning to office, how is that impacting individuals and our policies, and how do we want to have that flexibility? We have a employee unified group that focuses on mental health and education, and creating a platform and support and allyship and education and voice for individuals who are dealing with mental health issues. We also have, through our benefits, various programs and ways in which we can help our employees through challenging times. I think even for me as a person, going back to, kind of the personal thing is, last year was hard. And I think it took its toll on just changing from being in an office and having that, the biggest thing for me is having that downtime to commute between office and home. And then you're working at home, there is no downtime. So a lot of the stress that you carry in work, you're just going down the hall into, your family. And I think for us as a company, it is something that is very much important to us in ensuring not just the physical health and safety for all of our employees, but the mental health and safety for our employees.
Yeah, yes, at Verizon, we have mental health supportive programs as well as benefits to make sure that, as Anne mentioned, when an employee is their whole self, it's actually better for business, right? I think it's important to recognize that as well, but also to say that, like, we understand that we go through things in life that we have to be able to create spaces and create narratives and create environments where we encourage people to take advantage of those programs, to say it's okay to be able to go through these things, to have support groups. I think over the past year, we've all had to have really difficult conversations and go through a lot of difficult things. And as I mentioned, we can no longer leave ourselves at the work door when the day begins. And so acknowledging that piece of it and incorporating that into our day has been extremely transformative for us. One of the things that we do at Verizon, which, it took me like a couple of weeks to get used to, we had a meditation session that they just put on our calendars. And so you're like, oh, I'm too busy to do this. And so when you finally log in, they talk about your breathing and calming down and counting. And it's in those moments where I realize, like, it's that type of investment and creating that type of culture that is important to say, no, like, you should take advantage of this. You should join this support group. You should do these things. And then it's okay that we do not judge you any differently when you do these things, right? Between racial justice and the violence against the AAPI community and, economic strife and everything that we're going through this past year, housing, childcare, right? Schooling, is my kid going back or not? Are they going back for 2 hours of the week? What does that look like? And to be able to step back and have our leaders say, no, like, this is important. And, like, we value you, and the work will still be there, but we value you first.
Thank you. Anne, anything else to add? I know we had talked about this earlier as well for mental health.
No, I just think it's critical. I mean, it was great what Michelle and Christine are doing, in Jenner and Block, the firm that I'm at, it was Mental Health Awareness Month, and the firm took it really seriously. And, sometimes you think, oh, awareness month this, awareness month that, but it actually makes a big difference to say, listen, we are going to be intentional about making sure you really do know our resources. You do know that we're serious, that we want you to take care of yourself. We do know that it, like, you know, do what you need, whether it's turning off your camera or turning off your day and taking care of yourself. And I think, you know, that matters. And it matters that not only, you know, all of us say it, but, you know, frankly, the CEOs of our companies say it, the managing partners of our law firms say it. And so I'm just very grateful for everybody who is willing to say, we not only say it, we mean it. You're not going to be retaliated against. You're not going to be punished. This really matters.
Thank you so much, folks. We do have just one question that I'd like to ask each of you. And many of you have talked about this. We've had so much going on in the last year, so many changes, lots of tragedies, lots of different hardships. So in this time, what gives you hope? And we'll end there and wrap it up. So let me start with Christine, Michelle, and Anne.
Whoops, Christine, you're on mute.
There we go. You think 14 months into this, I would have this down. Just want to thank you guys and thank the panelists. This has been a great conversation. My hope is that we continue to have conversations like this, but that they also move us to action, and that it moves us to demand action towards a more equitable future for all. I think what I hope is that we're at an opportunity right now to where we can make a commitment towards equity, and I hope we meet that moment with real intentionality and with real progress.
And I echo what Christine says. I think what gives me hope, as much as all the tragedies that we went through last year, moving to action, moving to intentionality, moving to allyship, speaking up, not being, oh, it's somebody else's problem, or I don't want to get involved, is actually taking action and doing something meaningful with it. And I think the more that we can come together as a group and a society to recognize we have more similarities than differences, and how do we intentionally recognize and help each other through the challenges, but also it does take advocacy from each of us, and we can't sit on the sidelines anymore. And so that gives me hope.
Yeah, I'll just add that, you know, it gives me hope that people are being really kind and lovely with one another, and most of the time. And I think, you know, just being patient, and that's not always the case, certainly in the professions I come from, which is law and politics. So I really appreciate that people are doing that, and it does give me hope. And I think you're right, which is, you know, in some sense, you know, as women, we're often taught to not say something, to actually, like, you know, if you just sit at the table quietly, they're going to keep letting you be at the table, and you can quietly make that change. And I think it's like, oh my God, I can't stay quiet any longer. And I think that's a good thing. My daughter, who's 14, just did a presentation for her end of her 8th grade yesterday. And it was about being a change maker. And what she said was, you know, first 2 steps are educate and then speak up. And I think that's what we're doing here today. And it's really, I'm really happy to be with all of you doing education and speaking up. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine and Michelle, and it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate meeting all of you, and I just want to thank you all for being here today. So we're approaching the end of today's summit. Again, thank you to our esteemed panelists. It's a very enlightening conversation, and we look forward to seeing all the great success that come out of your innovative programs, and thanks again for sharing them with us. One final note to our attendees. This event was recorded, so we'll be sending out a link to the recording later today to everyone who's registered. In case you weren't able to catch it at all, we encourage you to share it with any of your colleagues you think might be interested in learning more about this important topic. So on behalf of the Bay Area Council, thank you again for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Take care.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet you all.
You too.